Welcome to Being Anna Tamburini Torre channel, and welcome to Summer Reading 2024, a new segment, an audio-only segment, in which I will read to you the pages of Two Hands and Two Wings, an extraordinary interview with an Arcangel, published by Mediterranean Editions, a book I wrote that was released in 2013. Introduction. Ein. Why live? Why die? Humanity has always continued to ask itself and the universe this question, never finding a satisfying answer, never reaching a shore that brings peace. That peace which refreshes, strengthens, and makes the many struggles of living, the anxieties, the fears acceptable. Answers to doubts have always continued to float in the depths of the unexplorable, destined to remain prisoners of our earthly limitations. We have always consumed our earthly lives in an amplified dimension, repeating like a mantra these insatiable existential questions. But who am I? What am I? Why was I born? What is the purpose of living? And after life, what is there? What is there after death? And when I have consumed all my days, what will I find? Nothing. The universal void, or another dimension, another life, the whole. Why live only to die? And why die? But what is the true meaning of our life and death? Our minds have been dwelling on these questions for millennia. And to find answers, they explore paths that range from the earth to the sky. Our mind imagines, constructs, creates great illusions, as sometimes she tries to expand the boundaries, to push beyond the verifiable, but she has no certainty. If one can act with humility and recognize their own limits, well, then they admit it, but often prefers to remain entrenched in her beliefs and therefore insists on denying everything she does not see, does not know, or does not understand. The fact is that when we think about the end of our lives, we all remain suspended by this unknown, the unknown of the last breath, where our mind is forced to capitulate and surrender to what it does not know, to what it does not understand. How many of us would like to find answers and learn more about this existential dilemma of who we are, where we come from, and where we are going? Everyone, or almost everyone, would want to know. Well, now I will tell you an extraordinary and exceptional story that I began to live a few days before my 50th birthday. A true story. It is the story of my life, a fascinating adventure that could finally provide an answer to humanity's existential questions. A splendid gift that life gave me right on the occasion of my 50th birthday. A gift to share with you who are reading my words, and with all of us ordinary mortals, inhabitants of this our planet. What you will read after my introduction is a long interview. I call it the journal book. A detailed interview published in the format of a book. A long quotation, to put it in journalistic terms, in which you will slowly discover, page by page, the true meaning of life and death. An incredibly extraordinary and remarkably stunning interview with a truly uniquely exceptional and absolutely remarkable entity. In short, you will have already understood that we will not be talking about trivial matters, as the great Toto would have said, but about issues that concern us closely, very closely. Get ready. Before leaving you to the interview, however, I want to open a necessary parenthesis. The story of a bit of me and my life to help you enter more consciously into the adventure I have lived, which I continue to live, and to take you and guide you to the origin of this story and this book. With my work, I have interviewed many people, heads of state, Nobel laureates, great directors, artists, actors, singers, industrialists, fashion designers, creatives, figures from the sports world, politicians, and of course, journalists and intellectuals. But I would never have expected that life, a few years after my husband's death, and on the brink of my 50th birthday, would offer me such a rare and special opportunity to interview an archangel. Certainly, for a journalist, after interviewing the greats of the earth, to write something new that goes beyond the ordinary, the only option left is to level up and move to higher planes. I mean, not to the earth. I truly believe that an opportunity like mine represents the highest aspiration for anyone doing this work. It's like a leap into the sky, so to speak, to meet and interview extraordinary characters and entities, and then back down to earth to report the latest news. As you will understand from reading, it has been a wonderful and challenging birthday gift, but extraordinarily engaging. A gift that is worth a lifetime. Definitely mine, and I hope also that of many others. The life of those who will want and know how to treasure the invaluable statements of this hour. Brother from heaven, who has allowed me to gather and share them with all of us. You know, there are things in life that do not happen by chance. They arrive at a certain point in our journey, neither before nor after. But, events that we do not always manage to interpret, to recognize in their true function, usefulness, and meaning. We do not realize that they can be fragments, vanishing points, or important details of a larger design. The present is always so overwhelming and does not allow space for anything else. It takes and hides everything, and it is only by letting time pass that the true meaning of the experience reveals itself to our eyes. The reason behind events, the meaning of life, of our life. But let's get to the facts, or rather our story. In the summer of 2001, a friend from Turin, who ran a center focused on meditation and spiritual research, asked me to meet Francis, a young man who had recently, and with much apprehension, begun to experience deep trance by channeling an angelic entity that he did not yet know belonged to the ranks of the archangels, as we call them, even though they say it is merely a classification of the human mind, a very elevated entity. I gladly accept and set a date to meet him. The study of the invisible side, and indeed the invisible side of man and life, from the psyche to the universe, from the mind to the spirit, has always fascinated me, and even today I continue to research in the realm of the immaterial dimension. A journey that has allowed me to meet many somewhat special people, as we say, and it should be added that my relationship with the world of the invisible has always accompanied me. Indeed, since childhood, I would perceive presences and energy fields. I felt rustling, shifts in the air, sources of heat. In short, I was scared and didn't have the courage to talk about it with anyone. Every now and then, I left my mother a bit confused, bewildered by my questions. But why am I here and not up there? as I pointed my finger towards the sky. Or I would slip away a bit. I shouldn't be here. I should be up there with the little angels. I looked at you and thought I had made you a bit different, my mother used to say. Because I gave birth to you at 35, quite an advanced age for those times, and she was still amazed. When she told me this, when we were both mothers. I have always lived with these perceptions, conditions that are anything but easy and very uncomfortable, especially when you are small and do not yet know what is happening to you and are unable to manage certain phenomena. You only know that you are very sensitive and see yourself as so different from others, so very different. Different. For me, it was a diminishment to be so sensitive. I saw myself as different and, above all, weaker for years. Until my youth, I lived thinking that others were much stronger, more capable than me at living. With my sensitivity, I lived without a mask, without skin. Every little rough thing scratched at me, causing me great suffering. And God alone knows how effective children and adolescents can be at playing tricks on each other. But one fine day I finally stopped suffering, because I realized that my sensitivity and intuition were a strength, an added value, and not a diminishment, but a plus. And they were also the reason why, when someone was experiencing emotional suffering and existential pain, they would knock on my door to find refuge and help. Well, I experimented with the planchette and mediumistic writing for a few years during my adolescence and youth. Then I stopped using tools and began to study the world of the invisible, walking alone for a long time until I timidly opened up to the interaction with what was around me. You know, in the 1970s, Turin was a laboratory city. It was a hotbed of ideas and teemed with initiatives related to the paranormal, featuring curious, interesting, and engaging characters, although sometimes, not always, reliable, to be honest. It was an exciting moment, with great exchanges and significant meetings. I remember round tables, a desire to explore these new frontiers, books, radio broadcasts. In short, it was all a buzz, surrounding the world of the unknown. In those years, alongside my journeys into the immaterial in my real life, I was starting a family with Marco, my first husband, and my beloved children. Anai and Igwa I was teaching, and continuing my studies in pedagogy and psychology. The Tanta years, on the other hand, were years of great transformation and growth, which left behind teaching, a painful overcoming, very painful, university studies in psychopedagogy, and the specialization, a diploma in journalism, public relations, a decade in which, although profoundly shaken in reality and involved in events, I have never strayed from the interests that have always accompanied my existence. In fact, during that period, I participated in roundtables and broadcasts that dealt with topics related to the paranormal. I presented books that spoke about angels and conducted many studies in the field of bioenergies. During those years, I began practicing Rantan therapy and helping others. In short, the true path of my life was already marked out, and I was just starting to see it. However, I understood that this was the path to pursue, even though, in my daily life, I was called to do other things. And then, still in the 80s, I met Michel, the man I loved very much and who loved me and my children very much, and whom I married in a second marriage, a great master of journalism and a man of refined culture. He was the director of newspapers who has trained students in the editorial offices of Italian newspapers and television, and he is still very much remembered. By them, he was also my journalism teacher. In the 90s, many things happened in my life, from the most exciting to the most painful. In addition to continuing my journalistic activities and producing and directing newspapers with and without Michelle, I intensify my research in the field of the immaterial. And so I attend schools, courses, and seminars in Italy and abroad. And from that time, I have a number of very vivid and significant memories. Especially during that period, I experienced a great deal regarding the knowledge and experimentation of human potentials. I remember, for example, when I learned to bend cutlery using only our energy, without any effort. Cutlery that I still proudly keep in my study tower, not so much to massage my ego, but to testify that it is possible that we are indeed matter, but in extreme synthesis, we are energy, energy that vibrates and can change intensity and state. That it is enough to modify the vibrational level of our body in order to act on the vibrational level of a cutlery item and manage to bend it. That it is possible to do so without tricks and without deceit, as has happened to me and many others despite the numerous detractors. In short, let us reflect on what we truly are. We are primarily and essentially energy, therefore, vibration. Everything around us and within us is nothing but energy that vibrates. And even the new frontiers of quantum physics and neuroscience explain this to us today, finally opening our minds to new scenarios. In short, it is a reading register that completely changes our existential perspective, and it is certainly not a trivial matter. But let's move on. As I was saying, in the 90s, very painful events also occur, and here we get to the point. In the late afternoon of the 4th of March, 1997, Michelle and I are in the car at the gates of Turin, returning from Cuneo where he had given a journalism lecture to a crowded audience of young students gathered in the main hall. During that journey back to life, however, it gifted us a handful of minutes, filled with infinite sweetness. We were both unaware of the undesirable and violent abandonment that was about to take place. Those minutes were the final lines of our love story on this earth. Everything has unfolded under the guidance of a masterful direction. The design of life has been definitively fulfilled in a tender and poignant way. That afternoon, the warm sun, now on the border between winter and spring, was preparing to set behind the curtain of the Alpine Arch. We were traveling slowly by car towards our home in Turin. I didn't know that these would be the last minutes of my life with Michelle. But I stated the fact. Everything I would have said and done if I had known what I was heading towards. During the journey, I unconsciously began to take stock of Michelle's life, drawing inspiration from what he had shared during the lecture in the Aula Magna. His life was dedicated to journalism. He was a man deeply in love with his profession. He always used to tell me, in the noise, I have had two great loves, the newspapers and you, who are my son. And he was a man who always lived his time with great passion. You have been good in your life, Michelle, I started to tell him as I was driving, but do you realize how many beautiful and important things you have done with your work? After all, what is life, if not a long breath? We inhale when we are born. We exhale when we die. And during this long breath, we should be able to create a work of art. But not everyone succeeds. You, however, have managed it. Well done. You have done well, he asks me. After drawing the line and doing the sums, I continued to philosophize about existence, and unknowingly I began to prepare him for the great separation. Look, Michel, isn't this sun that is beginning to set behind Monviso enchanting? If you look closely, Monviso resembles a supplication. It looks like two hands praying, with the tips of the fingers pointed towards the sky. We are here, on this motorway. The mountain is there, in front of us, but it is taller than us. And above it, there is something else even higher. This should make us reflect, shouldn't it? In the universe, there exists an order, a succession of levels, a hierarchy. We are just a small part of the whole, and we are below. The great is outside. It is above us. If we want to live in balance, we should be aware of what we are and understand where we stand in the hierarchy of the universe. Otherwise, we will always live, and with our great egos, hunting for armchairs in which to let them sink. Don't you think, Michel? At that point, he turned to look at me and said his last words. But how can you be so good? And he placed his hand on mine, which was resting on the gear stick, intertwining his fingers tightly with mine, and unknowingly with that gesture of love. He wanted to protect me for the last time, almost as if he wanted to shield me from that hurricane of suffering that was about to overwhelm me, and that he himself was about to unleash upon me. We remained silent for a while in the background, Lucio Dalla sang, Come, light to illustrate the things he said to us. A piece is a text so anomalous, compared with the rest of the CD we were listening to. If I remember correctly, it was Gregorian chant, creating a very surreal and ethereal atmosphere that was manifesting as the last ray of light slowly disappeared behind the outline of two hands, praying. In that moment, the sky held its breath. Time has stopped. It seemed that the day did not want to give way to the night. I looked at the sky and murmured, My God, Michel, what a lovely sight. At the same time, however, I felt this thought resonate within me, both enchanting and dreadful. It seems like the sunset of life. Moments later, while I was stuck in traffic at the first traffic light entering the city, I see Michel starting to feel unwell. I see his arms contracting against his chest, and I immediately sense that something terrible is about to happen. I begin to honk desperately to create a gap among all the cars in the queue. I understand. I realize that I cannot reach the nearest hospital and decide to go to the forecourt of the petrol station. Just after the traffic lights, I get out and tell the petrol station attendant to call an ambulance with the coronary unit. My husband is dying, I scream. Coronary unit understood. You need to call an ambulance. My husband has already had a heart attack. I open Michel's door, searching for the emergency pills he always kept in the pocket, inside his jacket. But they are not there. I open my work bag, find them, manage to place them under his tongue. I hold him and say, Michel, don't be afraid. Hang in there. I'm here. Don't give up. It will all pass. You'll see. The ambulance is coming. Stay calm. I'm here. I love you. You'll see. Everything will be fine, Michel. 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 Michel has gone just like that, looking into my eyes and my arms while I told him I love you, in the forecourt of a petrol station. I closed his eyes, and like all great ones, he died in the field. He died in the field after passing on the torch of journalism to the young, to those he believed in deeply in a classroom incogno. Is farewell to the profession he loved so much. The ambulance arrived, but his heart had already stopped beating. After extensive resuscitation efforts, these tireless angels of the road in orange uniforms miraculously managed to restart his heart, but Michel never regained consciousness. It was almost 8 in the evening. He remained attached to a machine until 4:30 in the morning that day. It was the 5th of March. That day, his heart stopped beating for good. And for the second time. For me and my children, a period of great sorrow, upheaval, and profound transformation has begun. Why have I told you all this? Because everything makes sense in our existence, especially the great trials. Over time, I have learned that these great trials never come by chance, and that at a certain point they arrive in our lives, when they are meant to, and have a purpose. It is us who do not know how to grasp the right meaning, and do not know how to use an appropriate register for reading events along the transversal axis of life. For me, for example, Michel's death marked the boundary line between one cycle and another, and prepared me for a new design of life that has materialized in the pages you are reading. During those years, my children were both university students. I spent a lot of time processing the loss of my husband. I always ran away from home because I could not accept the emptiness that Michel had left behind. For 2 years, every evening I drove my car along the roads of the Torinese hills to heal myself. I left home at the foot of the hill and began my night tour. I had a route that I would take more than once every night. The movement, the act of walking down the street, was, indeed, an escape from reality, but at the same time, it gave me the opportunity to gain a few more steps each evening, deeper into the long tunnel of pain. Sooner or later, I would manage to see the light and come out of it. I needed to overcome the shock of having seen the man I loved die while looking into his eyes and being unable to do anything to save him from death. Not even my arms were able to protect him and keep him here. With an obsessive-compulsive mechanism, my mind kept replaying the same film from start to finish and couldn't detach itself from those images. And so, I needed to cry freely without my children seeing me. I didn't want to cause them any more suffering. What I felt many times as a child, after my father's death, hearing my mother cry at night in her room. I needed to go through my pain in order to earn my way out of the tunnel. My background in psychology and spirituality has been very useful to me during those nights of self-help. I was coming home when I was exhausted at 3 or 4 in the morning. In the middle of the night, Dana would call me, just like my mum. At what point in the hills are you? She would tell me, everything is fine, don't worry, sleep peacefully, don't be concerned, Mum. We'll return when she is ready. I had warned and reassured them about my escapades. Oh, don't worry if I do strange things, but I need to do something to overcome the pain and somehow release the energetic tsunami that I have inside. Otherwise, I will get sick, my heart will explode. They were also feeling unwell. And to exorcise the suffering, we would occasionally look into each other's eyes, repeating like Rocky Balboa, "It doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt." Yes, it has been a very tough and exhausting training for life. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. My children have been exceptional and better than me at coping with the absence of Michelle. For the first time, they saw me on my knees, and what I call the great restitution took place. The roles have reversed, and during those years, it was Danae and Igor who acted as my mother and father. Yes, because Michelle, who was older than me, besides being my husband, lover, friend, and colleague, was also a father to me. That father whom life took from me when I was 7 also died of a heart attack in my mother's arms. And as an adult, I have reclaimed that father. I always remember the first Christmas without Michelle. A few days before the celebration, I had not yet taken the Christmas boxes down from the attic, and there was no sign of it in the house. For us, however, Christmas has always been a time of great celebration, joy, and cheer, strictly lived in accordance with tradition. One day, what happened? I came home and found the Christmas tree set up, lit, with decorations scattered here and there around the house. And magically everything was in its place as it always was. Usually, we decorated the house together with Christmas music playing in the background. That was the true beginning of our Christmas. Our togetherness, being a group, being together. That day, I remember I cried a lot and realized that my children had lost more than I had. I was left without Michelle, but they had lost Michelle and me as well. They were just over 20, and they were truly amazing. I will be grateful to them for the rest of my life, for helping and saving me. And I will always be grateful to Michelle for loving them so much. In those years, as I mentioned, cycles came to a close. Danae and Igor completed their university studies, successfully finishing their education, and I too, after closing the chapter of being a wife, made my slow journey back to normality. Never before during that time had I felt so close to heaven. When I felt that my body was too tight to contain the suffering. When I felt that my heart could no longer bear the weight of Michelle's absence. I would retreat to meditate in some church to dissolve the boundaries of my physicality and ease the pain. I found refuge in church because I was seeking contact with a reality that transcended the earthly dimension. Only in this way could I face the onslaught of fatigue that continued to slap my life. During that time, I met many monasteries and encountered many special people, men and women who were far along the path of human awareness, with whom I shared my reflections. Slowly, I returned to my work. In the autumn of 1999, at the end of the millennium, to preserve a professional souvenir, in short, something significant. From that historical moment, I treated myself to an interview with the Dalai Lama. I still remember the enthusiasm with which the Roman news agency I was working for at the time welcomed the proposal to interview the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Hundreds of thousands of copies were distributed in the last days of the millennium on all the planes of the Italian flag carrier, allowing millions of people to read the words of the Dalai Lama. With their heads in the clouds, millions of minds flooded by the ocean of wisdom from the Nobel Peace Prize winner. What a fantastic gift for me. And for others. It was the interview that brought me back to my work after 2 years, a good start to the millennium. Years of continuous growth. That lead us to the summer of 2001, to the 16th of June. The day I met Francesco, a date that marks the beginning of another cycle in my life. It was afternoon, and it was very hot. The heels of my shoes sank into the asphalt of the square as I hurried towards the Aurora Meditation Center. Francesco came to open the door for me and was surprised to see that I was the journalist he had wanted to meet a few years earlier. She had indeed seen me on stage at the sports hall in Turin during the USAC that I had organized in April 1997, shortly after the death of my husband. That evening, Francesco had tried to get closer to me at the end of the celebration, but he had not managed to reach me. There were so many people, almost 4,000, and he had left thinking, well, if I have to meet her one day, I will. And so it was. So it was. 4 years later, on the 16th of June, 2001. That is Isak from 1997. Perhaps many of you do not know. It is an event related to Buddhism. It is a ceremony that is celebrated every year in Tibet, but has now also become part of Western culture. In 97, I was asked to organize it in Turin, and we gathered thousands of people for the first time in Italy. But that evening was also important because it marked the first contact between Francesco and me. Life had put us on the same path, allowing us to get to know each other, but not yet to meet. I did not see him, but he saw me. But let's return to the events of the afternoon of the 16th of June, 2001. Francesco rejoices at the meeting. It has been 4 years since he saw me on the stage of Gasesh, and this also made sense. At that time, I would not have been ready to dedicate myself to the experience of the interview, this long interview, and this incredible story of my life. I was too affected by the loss of my husband. Once Francesco got over the surprise of finally meeting me, he told me about his young life at 22 years old and his experiences from 18 years ago when he first saw me in Borghese Park. We talk about what happens to him, the entity he channels during his evenings at the circle at the center of Aurora, which was called Oversea and was located in Arborello Square in Turin. He also shares his fears about going into trance and experiencing this process, as he had only started living the experience of deep trance a few months ago, and he was still facing it with anxiety and apprehension, something that over time helped him to overcome. And that afternoon, after his story, we decide to have a trance session, and the angelic entity that Aurora had also told me about arrives. And this entity begins to say the sweetest things about my husband and me. At the end of the session, before leaving, he asks me, "Why don't you come when I meet the other men?" What did it mean that once a month, Francesco had been going to this association for a few months, since he had started experiencing this deep trance and channeling this entity. Once a month, he would go on the first Monday of each month and meet all the members of that association, of this meditation center. They were indeed evening meetings that Francesco attended. I was in a deep trance and was channeling this entity that was speaking to me at that moment and was asking me why I don't come too when I meet the other men. All right, I will respond. Next time, I won't miss it. So, dear friends of Essa, I look forward to seeing you at the next episode of Summer Living. Thank you for choosing this channel. Thank you for listening to this new segment. See you soon. Let's meet again.